Hi, this is the Social Gelo with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Gelo with Angelo show.
What's up? And welcome to another episode of Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. Jeet Kune Do was never meant to be a style, but now it's being taught like one. So here's a question. What would Bruce Lee really think about what Jeet Kune Do has become? And how does that fit in today's MMA world? To break this down, I'm here with Dwight Woods from the JKD Dialogues. Is that right?
Yep.
And Miki Lopez, coming out of the Bay Area, boxing coach, Kajukenbo practitioner, and also JKD practitioner. A little bit of three things coming in. So for those of you that follow, and me, Angelo Ferreira, coming out of Japan, Kajukenbo practitioner, and brown belt BJJ, and MMA coach. So that's kind of a loaded question. Let's start simple. What does Jeet Kune Do mean to you personally? And we'll start with Dwight.
So to answer that question, I always keep this book close at hand, right? Jeet Kune Do, The Art and Philosophy of Bruce Lee. Because for me, that answers it right there. Yeah, so there's the physical aspect and there's the philosophical aspect, and it's all Jeet Kune Do. That's why actually we were talking about it just yesterday. That's why some of my seniors use the phrase philosophy in action to describe their approach to training. So it's never, the art of Jeet Kune Do is not hodgepodge. It's not grab whatever you can from wherever you can and whatever. No, there are philosophical tenets that should guide you in your training. Right now, some people might not call them philosophical tenets. They might say that there are principles or guidelines. Some people might even say there are concepts that guide you in your training. So depending on the language, you can have people agreeing with you or disagreeing with you. But for me, when I had my big school, and the marketing people that I studied with, they always said that you had to have like your go-to phrases, your go-to sentences to describe what you do. So for me, Jeet Kune Do is Bruce Lee's martial art and martial art philosophy, which espouses well-roundedness as a martial artist and well-roundedness as a human being. So that is the first part. There's more to it, but that's enough for now.
All right. I know. If you ever want to check out Dwight's show, he goes into long deep dives of this, and he's showing tremendous restraint right now. so thank you very much for answering that, Dwight. Miki, what's it mean to you, brother?
I'm gonna kind of trim that down, Dwight. To me, JKD is a freedom of expression. That's all I can really tell you. Since I've studied with Scott, he's kind of said, don't change anything that you already know, just add to it. And it's also a mindset. My mindset has changed since I've trained in JKD. I try to problem solve a little bit more. I don't try and, if I'm showing the technique, I always question it. I question a lot of things more now that I have trained in JKD, but as I get older, I notice that I'm starting to simplify everything as well. So that's it. Keep it simple. I what I do with my boxers is I use his 5 ways of attack. And Bruce pretty much simplified everything. He keeps it really streamlined. He drills, and he gets into the lab and sees what works and what doesn't. But that's pretty much it. It's, to me, it's expression. It's more of just being yourself. And again, he said that a lot, and I really didn't understand that. But as I get older now, I'm like, man, I can't keep up with these 20-year-old, 25-year-old, 18-year-old boxers anymore. So I have to adapt to them.
Right.
and I
Right.
really have to sharpen those little attributes. He talks about attributes. It's sharpening those attributes, you know. So and my reflexes. So, but other than that, I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it
that's
does.
it.
And then
It's expression, expression.
something I should have mentioned earlier is Miki Lopez is also a boxing coach over at D-Sal Academy. That should have said that first. Sorry about that. And then to
All
also
good.
address the elephant in the room for anybody who stuck around this long and didn't already throw this out, because you know how the internet is. A lot of the MMA people, and I say the MMA people, and I'd like to say the MMA online people. I'd like to distinguish between people who actually train and coach MMA, like me, Mickey, and even Dwight to some degree, and people who are just online talking about MMA. Those people have like very slow, small, short attention spans and can't get past the first 5 minutes. If you made it this long, time to address the elephant in the room a little bit about the idea of modern MMA. And we're going to ask a question. We're going to get to this, but I'm just going to get to this right now. For my story, real quick, my answer to this question, even though I'm not a Jeet Kune Do guy, and I've said this before, the whole reason I do martial arts is because of Jeet Kune Do. I know, it's really weird. I do not consider myself a Jeet Kune Do practitioner because I've never formally trained in Jeet Kune Do. But the weird thing is, 20 years later, I hear Dwight off camera talking about Heaven 6, and I recognize those phrases from people that I've trained with. So I've been, even though I never formally trained in Jeet Kune Do, I've been surrounded by these people the entire time. Like you can't get away from them. If you do martial arts, you can't get away from them. You're gonna bump into them. There's no way,
Yeah.
no matter what style you practice, from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or if you're an MMA gym, you're gonna come across, and they're not. You're gonna come across some Jeet Kune Do people. They're around you right now. They're in the shadows, if you will. So like the reason
Possibly, yeah.
the reason I got into martial arts was because of I read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and I wanted to get into martial arts. I read the Tao first, and the closest thing in my area I found was Kajukenbo. So I ended up doing Kajukenbo, but always under the questionable philosophies of Bruce Lee, where I never really wanted to. I never really wanted to adhere to a style. I never wanted to stick to a style. I get in trouble to this day, even within the Kajukenbo community, because of how I am about this. Is I do not profess to one style. I call it being a stylist. It's like the word racist, stylist, like when you're so in what you are that you're just going to start judging people. Either way, I digress. Our next question. Do you think Bruce Lee intended JKD to be a finished product or a constantly evolving framework? Dwight?
Oh, me first?
Oh, you're always first, man. You're
Okay.
the
Right.
resident.
So repeat the sentence.
All right.
Repeat the question. Right? Watch this. Go.
Do you think Bruce Lee intended JKD to be a finished product or a constantly evolving framework?
Okay. So Bruce Lee died prematurely. He didn't have any intentions. Died before anything was concretized, before anything was set in stone, before he could say this is this and this is not. Prior to where he was going, based on what we do have from him, would seem to indicate that there was a built-in flexibility. There was an inherent flexibility in the approach and the way of thinking, and therefore the way of doing things. So the question as to, what my thoughts are on what Bruce Lee intended Jeet Kune Do to be, I don't think Bruce Lee got to the point where he said, my intention is such and such. He may have gotten to that point had he lived. So I think we ended up with a process, but even the process itself is unfinished to a certain degree. Here's an example. Do we know what Bruce Lee's thoughts on grappling were? Do we? Mickey, what do you say? No.
I don't think he was finished with his grappling.
Exactly.
I don't think he was finished with his eskrima. I think it was all incomplete, honestly.
Yeah.
A lot of his stuff.
Right. See, so that's the thing. We don't know where Bruce Lee was going because he died unexpectedly. So when you hear people go, oh, Bruce definitely would have trained in BJJ, that's people imposing their likes, and they do it in reverse also. They impose their dislikes on Bruce Lee as well. So the ones who say Bruce would definitely have trained with the Gracies, and then the ones who go, nah, Bruce would never be interested in going to the ground because this and because that. Everybody is projecting onto poor Bruce Lee, right? Who just ups and died at age 32 prematurely. So, you know, we don't know. We don't know. So I don't think he got to the point where he said, these are my final intentions for my art of Jeet Kune Do. I don't think he got to that point.
Mickey, same question. And you can't just say what Dwight said. That's not allowed.
Well, you know what's funny is you guys mentioned Dana White earlier, and you know when you think of Dana White, you think of the UFC, and you think when Hoist Gracie first started, and it was the grapplers beating everybody. Now, fast forward 2025, you see the athletes, who's the best trained athletes now. You know, again, now even in another 10 years, you're gonna see just the better athletes using boxing and kicking and grappling. And right now, it's these wrestlers, these Dagestani wrestlers that are dominating the scene. Now, I think again, Bruce would be like, "Ooh, you know what? I think I need to add more wrestling." Well, now he's going to probably think, "Well, how do I stop these wrestlers?" So I think Bruce is always going to go back to the lab and say, "I like that, but how do I beat Khabib? How would I beat these current champions now?" But I these guys, these MMA athletes will never admit it, but they're Jeet Kune Do. They're constantly trying to evolve, and they've all heard of Bruce. So, but again, there's that for always being a student. You know, they're always going to keep moving forward. There's always something to learn. So, I think when Bruce died, he kind of left us all kind of hanging, but he said it's pretty much all right. Here's kind of the blueprint. Figure out the rest, and that's what I think.
And oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I like Mickey. I like that you use that word. That word blueprint is going to be featured next week in my Wednesday podcast.
Yes, sir.
There you go. There it is.
Yeah.
And this comes out on Monday, Tuesday. So of this week on June 23rd, June 24th. So that means that one's coming on June 25th. So if you watch this podcast, keep an eye out. Make sure you subscribe to the JKD dialogues. All right. So I had another question here along the same topics, but since Mickey's already bringing it up, let's go into this next transition here. So MMA is often considered the ultimate expression of modern fight. But Bruce Lee was saying, use what works back in the 60s. Is MMA just JKD with a rule book? And that's the question. Is MMA just JKD with a rule book? Dwight.
Strategically, yes. It's what a competitive sport form of Jeet Kune Do would be. Look, Mickey, I did a short answer.
Mickey.
I was waiting. I
No,
was like,
no. He didn't should answer. He's giving you some floor time, buddy. What do
man.
you got to say, Mickey?
Well, not. I think all sports are JKD. You look at Stephen Curry, you look at the guys at the NFL, you look at the mixed martial artists now, um, and they're all trying to one up each other. Now we talk about who's recovering better, who is doing the extra work. I think, you know, JKD again, it's a mentality. If you have that Bruce Lee mentality, that the Kobe Bryant mentality, that Mama mentality, it all comes down to that. Now Bruce had that. He had that it. You couldn't outshine him. He was the most competitive person. He was the Michael Jordan of the martial arts, and to me, in my opinion, he still is. He's still legendary even when he's dead. That's the thing. But as far as just martial arts in general, yeah, it's JKD. It's another martial athlete versus another martial athlete. You can call it Jeet Kune Do, you can call it whatever you want, but to me, it's yeah, it's Jeet Kune Do to me.
Yeah.
And Mickey, you brought up a really good point, right? And for those, I always have to pretend that you've never heard of Bruce Lee. And for those of you that don't know, right, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of his big. Did I say that name right? I said that name right. I hope I said that right. I said that name right. And for those of you that study your basketball history, he was the Michael Jordan of his time, right? So like or maybe I'm stepping a lot of basketball toes here. I don't watch that much basketball. Maybe someone's saying no, and they're gonna nail some other stuff. But he was a superstar of his time, and he talked about how JKD helped him with basketball. That's why he approached Bruce Lee in the first place, was to improve himself as an athlete.
You know that Kobe Bryant trained with Inosanto, right?
Ooh, there's another one.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But see what Mickey just tapped into is the Jeet Kune Do philosophies, right? So Bruce, brilliant guy that he was, with his study of philosophy and everything else, was aware of the fact that things change. That, so one of his statements is, to change with change is the changeless state. So that's where it goes back to your first question about, was it designed to be continually evolving? Well, yeah, he knew that. Like Mickey was saying, he knew that everything changes. So you want to go with the times. You want to keep up with the changes. So that's a Jeet Kune Do philosophy. And I think, Mickey, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why Mickey says all sports are Jeet Kune Do, because they're following that philosophy. Did I get that right?
Yeah, 100%, Dwight. Absolutely. And again, you look at LeBron James. Look at these. There's other monsters. I'm a big basketball fan too. So watching the kids nowadays as opposed to the kids back, 20 years ago are completely different. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. There's all these new weight training programs. And I know Bruce was in the weights, and I think that's how he hurt his back, if I'm not mistaken. You know, but yeah, it's just different. They have trainers that will, with higher degrees, to train you to become this now. There's just so much out there, especially if Bruce was around right now, um, he would be well, if he was, about his early 20s, he'd be a super athlete. So, but
Well,
Yeah.
he'd be a hell of a 80-something-year-old
well,
specimen,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah, for sure.
I'm
So
trying to find the part in the book. So it's on page 64 in Asano's book, where he talks about the first. I'll just read the first few lines, right? Um, Take, for example, the mile run. Until Roger Bannister broke that mythical human barrier, the 4-minute mile was thought to be beyond man's capabilities. Since he broke tradition, the world knows it can be done, and a score of others have achieved that goal. This is 1977 that Inosanto is talking about sports, right? And connecting it to the Jeet Kune Do mentality, because that's what Bruce Lee was doing. Bruce Lee was going beyond the traditional classical methods of training, right? Martial art, and looking at boxing. What do boxers do that makes them more functional? The average martial artist in mid to late 1960s, early 70s was not looking at boxing to integrate boxing with what he was doing. It just wasn't happening.
Dwight, stop me if I'm wrong, but Guru Dan trained the Dallas Cowboys, correct?
Yes. So
Mhm.
Bob Ward, who was the conditioning coach for the Cowboys, was a JKD student of Inosanto's. And that's how they brought, one of the first people that Inosanto brought to the camp was Ajahn Chai for Muay Thai. And so you can read up about Randy White's love of Thai boxing and what have you. So it was Chai and Inosanto, and then they also trained them in the Filipino empty hand stuff, the hubad stuff, right? Ron Balicki would have all the inside stories on that stuff, right? As a
And I
matter of
think
fact, I think he and Diana, didn't they want to make a documentary about it?
I've heard stuff online floating around
Right?
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard stuff of that, and Dana White wanting to get involved. I've heard rumors. There's just rumors. I don't mess with UFC copyright stuff, but rumors. There's rumors online talking about that.
Yeah, but I mean, remember that Inosanto was a high level athlete himself, right? Almost Olympic speed sprinter, 100-yard sprinter, right? Leading ground gainer for his college football team at his size, right? And a basketball player as well. Right. So I think athleticism is probably one of the things that he and Bruce Lee had in common, and then this forward-thinking approach to your physical training. I think they definitely had that in common.
And what I'm seeing, and what you're both saying here, and this is something very rare outside of the MMA community, and even within the MMA community, it's very rare to hear people talk about athleticism outside of martial arts. You'll talk to martial artists, and it'll always be within their sport. Like I said earlier, the stylist approach. It'll always be within the framework of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, within the framework of sport karate, within the framework of Muay Thai. It's very rare that you end up hearing something like, well, you can become a better athlete, you'll be a better soccer player, you'll be a better athlete by doing these things. And that's something that I think makes Jeet Kune Do a little different from the other stuff that's out there, in my opinion, as an outsider looking in. Now, what elements of JKD do you think have been lost? Now we're throwing a wrench. We're going to throw a wrench in all this. What elements of JKD do you think have been lost in modern MMA gyms, or were never there to begin with?
Take it, Dwight.
Yeah. What elements of Jeet Kune Do have been lost in modern MMA gyms? Well, I have a problem with the language, because I wasn't aware that there were knowingly JKD elements in MMA gyms. So unless I don't know if Jeet Kune Do and Bruce Lee are items which are uppermost in the minds of MMA trainers and gym owners and gym clients, gym members. I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. So the question of elements of JKD that have been lost, I don't know that JKD elements were ever there in the first place to be able to be lost.
Mickey?
Dwight, I'm a big fan of Eric Paulson. I'm a big fan of Greg Nelson, and I know for sure those coaches, and they've taught at the highest level, um, have taught their guys JKD. I see Rose Namajunas doing Hubud before her fights, which is awesome. And then Eric Paulson is Eric Paulson. Big fan of Eric Paulson. So, but as far as the other gyms, if you say JK, oh, I practice JKD, they're probably, what is that? So it's kind
Yeah.
of like it all depends on the instructor and the coach and how deep they go. But a lot of these coaches now, they'll do a little bit of boxing, they'll do a little bit of wrestling, jujitsu, but they won't brand it JKD. They'll just say, "Hey, I know mixed martial arts." But if
Yeah.
me being a martial artist, JKD practitioner, Kajukenbo practitioner, I in my head, that's my stamp. That's my
Hmm.
opinion,
Yeah.
because again, they like to call these MMA guys just oh, I do a little Thai boxing athletes, but they don't really have that whole, well, put into a box and what do you call it? MMA athlete. That, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
And I'm
Or
gonna
Yeah.
go. I'm gonna go a little further into that thread in a second. So hold on to that thought. I see where you're going, Mickey, and I'm just gonna. I'm going to put a pause on that because I have a question specifically for you lined up. That's gonna
Okay.
that you're kind of answering. And before we go there, I have one. I have one more on the topic of JKD and MMA. Would Bruce have approved of the sport fighting direction of MMA? Or would he criticized it for limiting real world self defense? I know it's a loaded question. Think about it, guys. And since I'm always saying Dwight, you guys, I don't know, rock, paper, scissors, see who goes first.
you know what,
I don't
Dwight,
know.
I'll take this one. Ha!
Okay,
Let me take,
go.
I got it. Okay. I think Bruce would love to see JKD or MMA, the mixed martial art athletes, in a cage with rules. But when it came down to real business out on the street, I think, me personally, I think Bruce would like that a little bit more because he would be able to utilize more of his JKD with the sticks, with the knives, with the nunchucks. Because you got to remember, um, again, please, I'm still young to this, but he grew up on the streets. I mean, Bruce was a street fighter, right? So he had to make sure that, he can use anything as a weapon and find a way as a way. So to me, uh, I think Bruce would be okay with, you know, Jeet Kune Do in the cage because you see John Jones using the oblique kick, and I saw Vanderlei Silva using a straight blast. But when it comes down to it, I think Bruce would want to finish the fight in under 20 seconds. So, but again, now in modern MMA, it doesn't happen that way. It's more strategy. It's more like, hey, let the ref win. There was no time limits. So I don't know if I just contradicted myself, but I think Bruce would lean more towards the street personally, or outside the cage with no rules. But that's just me.
Sorry,
But
there was a small tremor. I think there was a bit of an earthquake here. No,
oh God.
I'm okay. I just that's like if you
Whoa.
saw me look to the side, like something came at me. I felt the house shake a little bit. Kind of made me a bit nervous, a little startled. I'm in a dark room, and the room starts shaking a little bit, and I'm home alone, except for you
Man,
two. If you suddenly, if you
don't do
suddenly,
that to
Don't
me.
do that, Angelo.
I just saw an ad for a bed. They say in China they've made a bed that when the earthquake comes, the bed opens up and drops you into a compartment
Yep.
where they got food and water, and so you're in this bunker on your back until they can get to you. And I'm like, you're telling me I will be buried alive, right? What if it takes them 2 weeks to get to me?
there better be a lot
I'm
of
gonna
food
be
in there.
buried. No, I am never buying that bed when when I live in China. I
The
am
bur-
never buying that bed.
the bur-
No
the
way.
buried
Hell
alive, the
no.
buried alive
No,
option.
no. That is my biggest fear. Anyhow,
Yeah.
right? So,
Don't,
Sorry,
hold
um,
on.
sorry, everyone.
Dwight,
I went there.
Dwight,
I did this. I did this. This is my fault, and I'm sorry.
Why China? Dwight, why China?
Huh?
Why China?
What? Oh no, I was kidding
Did,
about that.
oh,
Yeah. I'm not moving. No, I'm not moving to China.
I was,
No.
oh,
No,
okay.
All
They
right,
wouldn't
let's
know
go
what.
further. Let's just
They wouldn't. They
keep
wouldn't know
going.
what to. They wouldn't know what to make of me in China. Please, right? Okay. So, Angelo, was the question
I gotta check the
about
question. I don't even know what
no,
we're
no,
talking
no,
about. I was like,
right? No. I'm just see because I don't know if the question was about, what do you think Bruce Lee's preference would have been, right? Because I think Bruce Lee could have enjoyed both. Now, during his time, he wasn't a fan of what he knew about martial art competitions of that time, especially my understanding of the no contact tournaments. He was not a fan of that stuff. He called that stuff unrealistic. I don't think, had Bruce Lee lived and the UFC and MMA became the phenomena that they became, that he would have looked at that and said, "Oh, that competition is unrealistic." No, I think he would have appreciated it. But I think he would also be able to distinguish and differentiate between the two. This one is martial sport, and then this is self-defense or combatives or what have you. So I don't see why he would have. I don't know that he would be in a situation where he had to make a choice. He'd be like, no, this is this and this is that. But I think he would appreciate that type of competition because he didn't see it in the 60s during his time.
okay, yeah, that's. I think, yeah. The original question was, would he be criticized it for limiting real world self defense? And if I understand you correctly, he would have appreciated it. Like
No, but see, it doesn't. It doesn't. Mickey said earlier he uses the 5 ways of attack. Okay, do the 5 ways of attack exist for self-defense as well?
100%.
Exactly. You see, so there's separation, but there is no separation, right? It's using no separation as your only separation.
So really, and you see people online always arguing about this stuff, right? And
Yeah, because they have nothing better to do.
that's right. So, they're always arguing about this stuff. Like you'll see people who adamantly hate Bruce Lee just because no valid reason outside of grabbing all traditional martial arts or anything from the past and viewing it as trash and viewing MMA as the only stylists. Going back to what I said earlier as stylists, I almost want to say, even though MMA is not a style, there is some people who take and not some people, again, going back to what I said earlier about the online people. These are people who I believe have never trained. They're only observing martial arts. There's a new thing happening in martial arts that's a little different now, is the spectator, the fan of, right? Before, there were some fans of martial arts, but my generation didn't have fans. You weren't a fan for very long. Like if you were, for my generation, I'm 1982. In 1982, if you liked martial arts, you wasn't too much longer until you did martial arts. It wasn't like, I'm a fan, I'm going to turn on the TV and watch some martial arts. That was not going to happen. The closest thing I can get is boxing or wrestling or judo, maybe. I came from a poor neighborhood. I didn't even have those channels. So if anything, I might glimpse a boxing match from someone whose house I went to who paid for it. But for the most part, I'm not going to have access to see this. So if I'm a fan of it, the best way I can be a part of it is to do it. But now with the internet and everything else, you have this new fan that's never done martial arts. They are solely fans of martial arts. And I've met these people and I've talked to them. Hey, I used to go like when MMA started blowing up in the early 2000s, we would go watch, we'd go to one of our, he was a brown belt at the time. Either way, we'd go to one of the students' houses to watch a UFC fight. And there'd be us, the martial artists, like 5 of us, and another 20 people in the room that never did martial arts.
Yeah.
And they're all talking, but they're all talking about it, like as if
they were all wearing tap out.
Yes, they were tap out shirts.
Yes.
They're all wearing tap out shirts, and they had really strong. They knew triangles. They knew all these names, and they'd always talk to us in this foreign language that we didn't understand. And look at us and be like, "You really martial artists? Are you really black belts?" And every so once in a while, one of them would test us, and we'd end up in the backyard having our little backyard UFC because of that kind of shit. And they'd learn real quick, they'd learn real quick that why we were watching it, we were enjoying the fight, but it was kind of weird that the majority of people there didn't do martial arts. And not only would they, when they found out we were black belts, want to talk to us, they kind of challenge us a little bit, even though they never did any martial arts in their life. And I want to say these people are online too. And a lot of these criticisms you see are from that. And I'm going to stop this right here because I'm getting mad and I'm losing my topic. So, Dwight, this question is specifically for you. You've talked about preserving versus adapting in JKD. What's the risk of freezing JKD in time?
Well, one, it goes against Bruce Lee's philosophy. Remember, to change with change is the changeless state. So it goes against his philosophy. So if you are a true adherent, a strong follower of Bruce Lee, you don't go against his philosophy. Okay? So my take, especially when the phrase is preserving Bruce Lee's art, do you preserve something which is alive, or do you preserve stuff which is dead? So if you're preserving Bruce's art, you think it's dead. You don't understand the philosophy. You see? So preservation, that's not a word that should be used. I don't think of, I can't, well, I probably could if I spent time on it, but I don't use that phrase about preserving Bruce Lee's art or whatever. Now, adaptation in Jeet Kune Do, yeah, that's the thing. That's a common thing because we all have to adapt to situations because we're all different people. We're all individuals. So everything that I can do is not everything that you can do, and vice versa. Right? What you and I can do is not what Miki can do, and vice versa. So everybody has to adapt. And Jeet Kune Do, because of the philosophy that's built, that runs through its veins, the idea of adaptability is built in. That's why it's using no way as way, or as Daniel Lee told me once, using no fixed way as way. See? So, and I said this just yesterday, using no way as way does not mean the same thing as using all ways. Those are not the same, that don't have the same meaning. Right? So, what was the question?
No, that was it. That was you
Okay.
You got it. You got it. You nailed it.
Okay.
That really answered what was about the risk of freezing. You answered it. You answered it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there's nothing to freeze.
Now for Miki, I actually have a different question. Miki, coming from Kajukenbo, which also has roots in a hybrid martial arts, how do you balance tradition and evolution in your training?
Well,
if that's too tough for you, Miki, I can answer.
Well, being that Kajukenbo is a traditional hybrid martial art, since I trained in Jeet Kune Do, I pretty much looked at my Kajukenbo and try to simplify it a little bit more. Did I do horse stances? I modified it. Did I do reverse punches? I kept my hands up. Did I use the fencing concepts from fencing instead of just, just in and out footwork like Kaj has? Do I do upper blocks? I do now. So again, I constantly go back into my traditional roots of Kajukenbo, and then I go, okay, how can I add this? And we're talking about, you said preservation. because I am a coach, it would always be passed down. So hopefully the seeds I plant in my students will constantly be evolving. They don't realize I'm teaching them Jeet Kune Do. They don't realize I'm teaching them anything sometimes, man, because but sometimes, but if my evolution is constant. Again, I learned from a kid that has ADHD. I work with a bunch of kids. So my evolution of martial arts and Jeet Kune Do and Kajukenbo are always evolving. I work with a lot of different people. I work with kids in juvenile hall. And these kids in juvenile hall are smart. So it makes my Jeet Kune Do go, whoa, that's a different mindset. So again, it's emptying your cup always, as Bruce again, Bruce would say, your cup is empty. My cup is empty. I look at certain things, and I go, can I add that to me? Does my body let me do that? Can I share this with Dwight and see what he thinks? And then we can have a debate. But see, if we're constantly debating, going back and forth, labbing it, hey, that doesn't work. Well, how tall are you, Dwight?
I think I'm 6 foot.
Okay, so you're 6 foot, I'm 5'7". Maybe that won't work. So again, it's always going to be debate. I think that's what's beautiful about martial arts is there's always going to be a debate of what works and what doesn't. Everyone says, "Oh, why do you do that butt stuff?" I said, "It's just a drill, man. It's not meant for like me to do something." But I'll tell you what. When you're throwing that right hand, and I squat in my little horse stance, and I upper block and I counter. That's Kaj. Or if I slip and I hit that up jab on you, that's Bruce's vert. So again, to me, I'm able to just take what I know because I'm doing a lot of boxing right now, and it's there. All his work is there, and it's lab, it's tested. But I don't know what I just was going on a rant about.
The rant was about how you personally process balancing tradition and evolution in your training, and then it's specifically for you because as Kajukenbo, I'm a Kajukenbo guy too. We have this responsibility to continue to do these things a certain way, but at the same time, we're told that we can do whatever we want, which is gets us in a lot of trouble. Gets us in a lot of trouble. I'm sure JKD.
Well, you're gonna get me in trouble, bro.
We're gonna go into a JKD question about this, but this is one of the hard parts of Kajukenbo. Is we're told we can do whatever we want when we get our black belt, but I always say you just like you have freedom of speech, but you're not freedom of consequence. So like same with the martial arts. Like you got the freedom, but you're not free of the consequences of what other people may think. And we have a whole hierarchy, and that hierarchy exists and is there. And that's gonna bring me into my next question in a bit. But Kajukenbo is a little bit different because there is a board of directors, and there's the politics behind it. There are a few entities that are really strong, and if you're doing something that's not following a certain set parameter, for example, things that are outside of that don't look anything like punch techniques, punch tricks 1 through 10, grab tricks 1 through 10, club tricks 1 through 10, knife tricks 1 through 10. If you're doing something that's way out there, that's not close to that. If you don't have your Palama forms 1, 2, and 3, there's certain groups in the Kajukenbo community that are going to say that you're not doing Kajukenbo. And I'm going to put a lid on that and say, how do you both feel? Since I got controversial Kajukenbo, let's bring JKD back in the mix. How do you both feel about? And we're going to start doing fast fire questions, guys, to try to finish this within an hour. How do you both feel about JKD lineages today? Do they help or hurt the art? Since Dwight is up there in that, I'm actually gonna start with Dwight.
The disputes between lineages doesn't help anybody. This rapid fire, right? So
rapid fire, okay, yeah, rapid fire. All right, Miki.
Yeah. So disputes
rapid fire.
help.
Miki, rapid fire.
Literally, yeah, I agree with Dwight on that one. It just doesn't help anyone. We just end up being divided.
There it is. Next, looking at the future, is Jeet Kune Do still relevant for the next generation, or is it being outpaced by combat sports? Miki,
One more time, please. I'm sorry.
is JKD still relevant for the next generation, or is it being outpaced by combat sports?
It depends on the coach who gives out the information. So if I'm being coached by you, you're learning JKD.
All right, Dwight.
It's relevant to those who are still involved in it, and if they're instructors and they're spreading it, it'll remain relevant, but in small numbers as compared to before. Sorry, I couldn't do an easy answer on
No, no,
on
no,
that
no,
one.
no. It's okay. It's okay.
Right. But if my plans go the right way, it'll become more relevant in the future.
All right, all right. If Bruce were alive today and walked into a JKD seminar or an MMA gym, what would make him proud and what would make him flip a table? We don't have to do too fast fire. We'll give you a little time to breathe on this one because that's a little that's a little bit of a loaded question. Miki.
I think Bruce would flip a table if things were not simple. If they were just trying to force a technique, he would probably flip a table. I think Bruce would be happy if he saw simplicity, a jab, a cross, a leg kick, a takedown, um, you know, basic 1 through 5, things that would work like right away. Because again, we're talking self-defense and performance. So anything that's simple, cool. Anything that would probably have to do with a complicated spin kick or technique or something of that nature, probably flip a table.
Dwight.
What Mickey said.
I never told Dwight he couldn't say that. He got me on that one. You're right. I couldn't say that. I didn't. I never told Dwight. I told Mickey he can't say that. I never told Dwight he can't say that. Good one. Got me on that one. Use those rules against me. All right. All right. This one I'll give you a little time because it's not gonna be an easy answer. What's your personal mission in keeping JKD alive and functional in 2025 and beyond? And we'll start with Dwight because I know you're working really hard with the community with that one.
Okay, so remember the part I told you about Jeet Kune Do being Bruce Lee's martial art philosophy, a philosophy which espouses well-roundedness as a human being, as a martial artist, and as a human being, right? So well-roundedness as a martial artist, that means you have to train in 2 areas because there's only 2 areas of martial art training. There's weaponry and there's empty hands. Okay, as a human being, that means you're working on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual development. That'll never go out of style. And in Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do, we happen to have a role model, okay? Because like you were talking about spectators, there are people who are big fans of Bruce Lee who have never trained in martial art, but they're big Bruce Lee fans. And they maybe even have collections of Bruce Lee memorabilia and all that stuff. So I think that we have a gift in being Jeet Kune Do practitioners. We have a gift of somebody who is a role model for a lot of admirable human qualities. Okay, because if you go, okay, well, is Bruce Lee a role model for being relentless? Yes. Is Bruce Lee a role model for taking care of his body? Yes. Is Bruce Lee a role model for setting goals and working to achieve these goals? Yes. All these things. So yeah, that's the mission, to keep that to keep that as relevant as I can.
All right, Miki.
Question one more time, please, Angelo.
The question was, what's your personal mission to help keep JKD alive and functional for yourself in 2025 and beyond?
Man, to always to continue to research, to see new training methods, to adapt to my current age, and to just continue to seek out different ways of thinking. I think more and more as I uh, continue this lifestyle, I need to learn how to be a student more, listen more, listen to a lot more podcasts more. I've been listening to a lot more psychological, physical, um, you know, the sarcopenia. If you guys don't know what that is, the loss of muscle mass. Eventually we're all going to have to battle ourselves, and we're going to have to work through that. So that's my biggest thing. My Jeet Kune Do is to defeat me. I don't know if that makes any sense. But and again, to share, again, with my kids, it's mindset, it's Jeet Kune Do's relentless, the mama mentality, the find a way to win, that. But for my older students, and I work with boxers that in their 60s and 70s, and I stop and I just listen to I look at their limitations and I make it their strengths, if that makes any sense. Because when I do my boxing classes, they say, "Wow, you know what? You really make me think in this class." So by me making them think, it helps them focus more. They go, "I really love your class because you're helping me remember." They go home, they're able to remember stuff. So to me, um, uh, everyone's my student. I learn from them, they learn from me, and it's synergy. That's what it has to be. There cannot be any separation. And if there is, just again, throw it out, just like Rich would say. But have that empty cup always with anybody. I don't know if that made any kind of sense, but
No, it did.
that's my answer.
One. No, I mean it did. It answered the question, man. It answered the question. And I think what really happens, like before I did this podcast, one of the things I was thinking about was about how at the end of the day, martial arts for me is supposed to free you. It's not supposed to trap you in a box. It's not supposed to, whether it's Jeet Kune Do, MMA, or even Kajukenbo. For me personally, I've never really cared. And I want to say, because like I said earlier, I read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and after reading his work, what I walked out of it with was, I really don't care about the style. I care about effectiveness. I really care that whatever I do, I want to make sure it works. Whatever I teach, I want to make sure it works. At first, I was very selfish in my martial arts journey. It was all about me and what works for me. And then I found Kajukenbo and ended up becoming an instructor. Not my plan. Not my plan. My plan was very simple. I grew up in rough streets and I wanted to defend myself. That's it. There was a very simple goal in mind. And in that path, I ended up finding martial arts, the whole community, and some awesome stuff happened. But teaching wasn't one of them. Though teaching was an awesome thing to happen, but wasn't one of my plans. So when I started teaching, and I get in trouble for this even to this day, I will teach what works for the person I'm teaching it to, and I don't care what toolbox I pull from for that. I'll listen to someone coming in. I have a kid coming in right now. I'm going to teach him in 30 minutes. He's already got a kickboxing coach. He's already got a boxing coach, and he wants to learn grappling from me. Even though I teach the other two things, he wants to specifically learn grappling from me because there's no other grappling places in the area. So when he comes in, it's all about trying to figure out, well, he's already got his boxing. I've tested out his kickboxing. It's doing pretty good here. What can I do? Because he wants to do MMA. What can I do to help him with his grappling? Well, we're going to throw out the gi because he's not going to be using that. And automatically off the bat, I don't care if some gi jiu-jitsu guy gets his thong in a bunch because of that. That's their problem, not mine. Again, what's his goal? What's my goal? And I want to say, this attitude, almost like an attitude problem, comes from the book I read about on the Tao Jeet Kune Do. That I really, the Tao, I probably pronounced that wrong, but that book influenced me like that, in the fact that I don't have a big thing. If I'm looking at something, I would love to teach everyone Kajukenbo. It's kind of something like a side project of mine. But at the end of the day, I really care about the person getting whatever it is that they need, and it has to work. So for me, I feel that the question isn't so much what style you practice, but it's whether it's making you better, right? And you two were both, I learned something new every day. You two both brought up the idea of being better athletes, being better outside of just martial arts. And I know it's cliche to start talking about personality, being a better person, all that, but there is this thing that happens about what was Bruce Lee really chasing? What was the legacy he was really going after? And he was a very well-rounded individual. He studied philosophy. As someone that came from the streets, reading about a book to defend themselves from the streets, it was really weird to me hearing about someone who had a degree in philosophy, going to a university. This things that seemed foreign to me because I never ever thought about going to a university, and it put that thought into my head. I never even thought about going to college. Wasn't not my parents never went to college. I'm a first generation in my family to get a college degree. I'm also the first generation in my family to get a master's degree in psychology. And it was all because of that. And I don't think I would have found that. Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have found that somewhere else. And for that, I'm only eternally grateful to the man, Bruce Lee. All right, I want to say thank you to Dwight Woods and Miki Lopez for coming out for another episode of the Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. One of these once a month. We tackle it once a month. Well, that's the old format. Once a week. Once a week. And now like daily shorts. It just doesn't stop. I'm just like a content machine lately. And I apologize for anyone who doesn't like that. And I want to thank those who are enjoying the content. I'll keep trying to put it out there. Dwight Woods, I have a link here for his. You have a YouTube channel, right?
I have two YouTube channels, my friend.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I'm going to put the links here because he's going to send them over to me. And this should be, this is all post-production, pre-production. It'll be right here. You can click right there. It'll take you straight to his YouTube channel so you can subscribe. You can also find him on Facebook at the JKD Dialogues, or you can type in Dwight Woods. He comes up. Like there's a bunch of stuff that comes up on him. He's kind of famous.
I hope so.
It's kind of famous. Miki Lopez, D-Cell Boxing Academy. You can train with him out in the San Jose area. He's always open for drop-ins, right? No?
Not San Jose. They were, the Bay Area.
The Bay Area. He doesn't want to give his exact location, but you can find him. You can always find him if he wants you to. He's like Batman. All right, y'all.
It's easy to find, bro.
Thank you for checking it out. We'll catch you next time.
Peace.
This has been a Social Gelo production. If you're interested in being on the show, feel free to reach out. Just email me at socialgelo@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow me on social media, Instagram, Social Gelo, Facebook, Social Gelo with Angelo, or follow me on my personal page under Angelo Ferrer. LinkedIn, search Angelo Ferrer. YouTube, if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, make sure to check out my YouTube channel, Social Gelo with Angelo YouTube channel. And wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform, make sure to follow and subscribe and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.
Writing the song for you.